Thank you so much, Dina, and thank you, everyone. I will keep it as brief as I can, and definitely try to leave some space for questions. Let me just share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. As Dana said, my name is Olivia Flynn. I'm a senior designer and researcher at Gale Architects, calling into you from Copenhagen this evening to talk a little bit about foodscapes, which is about food system change at the neighborhood level, and feels so much alignment with the colleagues presenting from Feast and from Ghent. A lot of kind of similar concepts and ways of approaching these kind of big challenges. Just very quickly to talk about Gale. So Gale is an urban design and strategy focus studio that's really focused on leveraging everyday behavior and design to create high quality of life in urban environments. And sometimes that's done through a master plan or a new street, or it's also done through research projects and pilot projects like I'll talk about today. This builds on the foundation of someone called Jan Gale's methodology. He was an architect trained in the 60s, really in the modernist tradition, and fell in love with a behavioral psychologist who asked the good question of what is the experience of a human being in that thing that you're drawing? And he, as modernist of the time, didn't really have a good answer for her, and had never been asked that question. And so he really turned away from the academy to develop a methodology and decades of research studying the relationship between everyday life that unfolds in our cities and form, and how the built environment and architecture and design either encourages or discourages certain kinds of behaviors. So that is the methodology and the approach that really Gale takes to all of our work, and especially the foodscapes work. So we have people trained in design, but also in social science, in public health, and really in systems thinking. And we think that that's important because sometimes there can be a bit of ego in design or architecture, right? That doesn't always account for people's actual experiences, behaviors, and habits. And that if we don't take that into account, then people won't use it and won't adopt it. And we really think the same for, if we want to change our food systems, or we want to encourage people to have healthier food behaviors, then we really need to pay attention to people and pay attention to the communities that we're working with. So we have really been trying to do this. So trying to work in this overlap of urban planning, urban design, and public health by focusing on people's everyday behavior and where they can improve their own health and the health of their community. But oftentimes, so many health research and initiatives are really focused on individual behaviors. But we know that individuals oftentimes face barriers so much larger than they're capable of controlling, and puts pressure on people to make decisions and change behaviors that require more financial resources, more knowledge, more time than they have access to. Or we see a lot of efforts that are focused on systemic change, which is really important and really where we need to go. But we also know that it's incredibly complicated, and that this relies on interconnected factors like land use and transportation and food pricing and taxing, and those kind of all of those different facets. And so our perspective in this methodology is really about filling the gap here, and that the neighborhood scale is a way to kind of connect public health and urban planning in a way where neighborhoods can actually be a test bed for interventions that bridge this gap between individual behavior change and systems change. So that this approach can actually provide some agency and sense of ownership to local communities while still operating at a scale that can influence environmental, health, economic outcomes of a city. And so we believe that by working in a neighborhood, this is sort of where the system is meeting the individual there every day. And that we know that the built environment, that working with public space and design is just really one small piece of the puzzle, but it is a good place to start, right? Because people don't necessarily change when you tell them to change, but when their environment changes or they enter a new environment, they naturally begin to adopt different behaviors. So can we really pay attention to people's lived experiences and the surrounding environments and make the healthy choice the easy choice? So we know that this really goes beyond the individual. This is something that's influenced by the social environment, what the city looks like, what people's cultural habits are used to, or what they're used to eating and what they're used to cooking. But that, again, if we can start by just by focusing on communities and where these kind of complicated systemic phenomenons meet people, that we can maybe start to move the needle and move towards the kind of health outcomes that we want to see in cities. And so we have developed a methodology and a toolkit that uses a combination of digital tools and analog observational tools to just help us understand a little bit about people's lived experience. Not that that's something that we're going to be able to completely understand overnight, but can we start to get a little bit more of a holistic understanding of why people make the food choices they make and how their surrounding environment can either facilitate a healthy food experience or challenge it. And so I'll move through these kind of quickly and so I can get to a case study, but we always start at a really high level. What is happening in this foodscape? Is it a food swamp, as was mentioned before, or is it a food desert? What are the programs and the actors that are already doing work in this area, and where do we build off of? Really core to this approach is listening to people. So asking people questions that they're expert in, having them take us around their neighborhoods. What are their daily routines? What bus line do they take to get home? And then what is the adjacent food offer close to the bus stop? Those kinds of things. But really trying to understand what qualities and what experiences are important to people in the way that they use their neighborhood and the way that they consume food. Another thing that kind of goes back to this core Gale methodology is observing people's behavior. So how people move around and spend time in public space. The kind of example I'm walking you through is from London, where it was focused on childhood obesity and working with teenagers, and that, of mapping people spending time in public space, 2/3 of teenagers that we saw were spending time at bus stops, most of which are by the McDonald's. We then look at, so not just human behavior, but what is the quality of the space? And we can see these kinds of things at this sort of like perfect scenario of the McDonald's being right behind the bus stop, that if you just have 5 minutes to wait for your bus, it's right there. If you're a teenager, it's actually quite a nice place for you to be, that it's somewhere, that's safe. If you call your parents and you say, this is where you are, they know where that is. Just one person can buy something and 10 of your friends can hang out. You can charge your phone, these kinds of things. So actually that the quality of the quality of the space of the McDonald's and the proximity to the bus stop was offering something for socializing, a social space for teenagers that they didn't have in other places. So taking this kind of qualitative lens to looking at foodscapes. And then what we do with this kind of data is create stories where we can create a shared understanding of the challenges and the solutions and move, depending on what the project is and what the context is, if it's food insecurity or carbon emissions or these kind of things, take these challenges that usually exist in a, really high level quantitative data narrative into something that's very relatable, human challenge and opportunities, and different stakeholders can start to see themselves as a part of the solution and be inspired by it. So can we actually move change by inviting people to see themselves both in the challenge, but also in the solution? And then can we propose some actual pilots to move towards healthy neighborhoods? So if this maybe actually isn't even about the food so much, it's about having a social place to hang out, can we create, can we improve the quality of the bus stop, or on in between the route to school and the bus stop, can we create some other social spaces for teenagers that have a different food offering but make them feel really invited? So the goal of this is really just of the kind of projects that we want to do, is that we want to collect data that helps elevate communities' experiences, tell stories that are very easy for people to relate to, try some things. So Johanna was talking about research fatigue, that a lot of times people get asked tons and tons of questions about their food experiences, but very rarely see something. So we really believe in starting small and doing neighborhood scale interventions. So then we can also measure how has behavior changed, who's coming here now, what are people eating now, and then be able to use that data to talk about impact in a different way and scale up towards policy change, towards larger interventions. So I'll walk through one more quick example in Copenhagen. So this was again working with teenagers in Copenhagen to reach. We were asked by the municipality of Copenhagen to work with young people and learn about their food habits to try to shift their behaviors to meet Copenhagen's carbon emissions goals. So we had the teenagers sort of walk us around their school and really learn that they go to the supermarket 2 or 3 times a day because it's a place where they feel like they have freedom, they have autonomy. They can, buy something that they think is delicious, but not spend a lot of money. And so, we thought, can we just intercept them really simply? This is pretty simple stuff that the school is on one side, the supermarket's on the other side. What if on the way here we added a new place for them to hang out, a food offering that aligns with the planetary diet, and at a price that feels affordable to them. We talked to them, we co-created a design brief, trying to really understand what's important to them when it comes to food places and food offerings. And then, did a pilot. So syncing up both a new public space design, a new food offering that follows the planetary health diet, and then different campaigns, so different kinds of advertisements in the supermarkets that were nudging people towards healthier food options. We're then able to, go back and collect this kind of data that we saw a big increase in the amount of teenagers spending time and the amount of people eating this food, but also then we're able to measure, based on how many meals bought per day, how many tons of carbon were saved in just this really small pilot that happened for a couple months. That imagine if we did this over the year, that we could actually make sort of a significant impact and move towards Copenhagen's emission goals. So I think the point of this is also just that this can feel like, changing food environments and working with food systems can feel like something incredibly challenging and not knowing where to start. But I think that, this approach would be start small, start with the community, start with the neighborhood, and then also go back and measure. And then you're able to have a conversation about, intervention and bigger scales of change and lasting impact in a different way. Right. So then we're able to bring this to policymakers and leaders in Denmark, saying that, this is a really small, just 1 street in Vesterbro in central Copenhagen, but what if we did this across 1,000 different sites in Denmark, that we would actually make some significant change on the emissions targets for 2035. And that pilots really can be a way to pave the way for systemic change. So it's usually cheap, it can go fast, and people can sort of vote with their feet, if you will, that they don't necessarily have to come to a meeting at a specific time to have their voices heard, but they can just be walking by the supermarket and experience this intervention, give some feedback, learn, and then we can learn from it and improve based on their experience and sort of meet them where they are, if you will. And then we know that pilots is really just one piece of it, right? That this is also about the kinds of programs and investments that we have ongoing, and ultimately policy change towards longer term impact. And I know I'm going quite fast, but trying to keep to our time, but just to end here, that this is really what we're going for, that in this, with this methodology, with this Foodscapes approach, the kinds of things that we hope it to achieve is connecting underserved communities to healthier food and to food education, improving the quality of the public realm. So using these kinds of assessments and our spatial expertise as architects and designers to address inequalities in the public realm conditions that contribute to poor health conditions for marginalized communities, and then leverage that urban design improvements and behavior change to make it easier for folks to make a healthier choice, empower community leaders. So in all of these projects, we do all over different places in the world. We're always working through a local partner who knows the neighborhood extremely well, knows the community extremely well, and empower them with the tools and research that we have, and then sort of as a longer term impact to reconnect people to organic systems. So I'll stop there. I'm not sure if there's time for any questions, but thank you for listening.